It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. It's time to wake up.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to the most exciting panel of all, because we're talking about nothing less but the future of humanity on this planet. We're talking about biodiversity and why it matters for businesses, and why we need to overcome our carbon tunnel vision, where we look at carbon and just think this is the only thing that matters. It does not. Biodiversity matters a big deal. So there's one quote which I always like. This is: climate will decide how we live in future, and biodiversity will decide if we live on this planet in future. My name is Anna Alex. I'm a serial entrepreneur from Berlin. I just have started my third business. Many years ago, I founded Outfittery, then I turned over to sustainability, founded Planetly, sold Planetly, and now founded Nala. And with Nala, we're focusing on biodiversity, making biodiversity measurable for businesses. So this just for you as a background. A few months ago, I talked to the organizers of the GREENTECH Festival, and I said, I'm so much looking forward to having this again, having all these great people here, having these vibes again, on green tech, on innovation, and so on and so forth. But where is nature on stage? We cannot just focus on climate. We need to bring nature and biodiversity on stage. And they said, yeah, you're right. Anna, can you maybe moderate? So, and here I am moderating for the first time. So please help me making this a great panel. Help me with great questions that we will allow from the audience in the end. And now, enough of me. So let me introduce my great panelists. So Chris, Tobias, and Tony, please join me on stage. Good. You sit here where the mics are. Okay, yeah. So, go over. Okay. But you get I join you too, yeah? I join you too. Okay, taking a seat. Good. So, Chris. Chris is the founder and CEO of Ocell. And Ocell is enabling high-quality carbon credits with AI. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tobias is fellow at the Senckenberg Gesellschaft for Nature Research and is working with a lot of businesses on biodiversity strategies.
That's it.
And Tony is senior fellow of the G20 Land Initiatives and is wearing different hats. One hat is the political hat, the scientist's hat, and in the investor's hat. So a lot of different hats. So great to have you all here. Let's start with some warm-up questions. First, and these warm-up questions goes to you, not to you. So first question. In the whole of Europe, how much land is still wild and is not managed by humans? On average in Europe. Is it A, 0.5%? Is it B, 1%? Or is it C, 3%? Okay, second. So who is for A? Who is for B, 1%? And who is for C, 3%? Okay, you're right. Crowd intelligence. So it's 1% of the whole land on average in Europe, which is wild, which is not managed, where we as humans let nature be as it is. I found this very shocking. Second question. How much of the global GDP is directly depending on nature? So of the global economic force in their operations, in their supply chains. Is it A, 30%? Is it B, 50%? Or is it C, 90% of the global GDP, of the global companies directly depending on nature? So who is for A, 30%? Who is for B, 50%? Who's for C, 90%? Okay, perfect. So this 50% is the right answer of a direct dependence on nature. Of course, in the end, it's 100% because we all are very dependent on nature and on biodiversity, but we will hear more about this in a second. Okay, last question. How big are the ecosystem services that nature is providing for us without counting for them and without paying for them? So the services, if you translate them into value, into money, how much are these ecosystem services that nature is providing for us? Is it 10% of the global GDP? Is it 80% of the global GDP? Or is it 200% of the global GDP? So is it double what we account for? So who is for 10% of the global GDP? Who is for 80%? Who is for 200% of the global GDP? Yes, right. Okay, you're a very smart audience. So yeah, very good. Okay, applause on that. Very good. Okay, cool. Then let's come to the agenda for today. We want to first widen the focus a bit, talk about why biodiversity matters. Then talk a little bit more about the visions, because I feel this is always missing. It could be all so good, but we need to have a common vision. So I'm very curious to hear your visions for the future. And then after having talked about visions, we will get down to earth and talk about what as a concrete next step needs to follow from here. So let's start with the first, widening the focus. Chris, we start with you. Why is biodiversity so important for humanity?
So biodiversity is essential for the stability and also the resilience of basically all ecosystems. And think of the ecosystem services that you just mentioned. They provide such life-essential services to us, including, for example, our food, or including, for example, our drinking water, right? And what we are experiencing today is that due to a lack of biodiversity in some of those ecosystems, that we are actually losing some of those ecosystems. So I'll give you a very practical example. Maybe some of you saw this in the news. So the German forest is currently experiencing really devastating times. We are losing a huge amount of forest. So in fact, it's about 500,000 soccer fields of forest that we have lost in the last couple of years. And you might be thinking, yeah, but what does this have to do with biodiversity? It's a natural forest, right? But you already mentioned it's only 1% of the land is still wild land. And in forestry, actually in Europe, it's 96% of the forests. They're not natural forests, they're professionally managed forests, yeah? And when you manage a forest, you can set it different directions. You can say, okay, should I optimize for biodiversity or should I optimize for profits? And unfortunately, in today's world, this is not aligned. Yeah, so the forest management of today, they are optimizing for profits, which means monocultural forest. We see a lot of monocultural forests in the world and also in Germany. And these forests are not stable forests and we are losing lots of it. So this is really critical.
Yeah, and what I learned and found very interesting that we planted these monocultures just in order to make quick money.
Absolutely.
After the war, and now they are just like all falling off.
I mean, I don't have to lecture Tony on this. He's a PhD in forestry, but I think most of you are not. And I'm also not. I don't have a forestry background. I'm an engineer by training, actually. But we are looking into the data of forests a lot. And most of the forests in Germany are managed and B planted, professionally planted. And yeah, it's mostly spruce, or in the Berlin region, it's pine forests. And biodiversity has played only a minor role in forestry. And now with climate change, of course, everybody talks about, we need more biodiversity in our forests and so on. But who's paying for it? You can not just look at the government and say, hey, please give us some subsidies or something. We need to find measures that align commercial interests in forestry with interests of humanity in biodiversity, in carbon storage and so on. And that's why we at Ocell believe that carbon credits is a great tool or measure to do so. With carbon credits, you can align these two different perspectives and you can align them and maximize profits while maximizing nature impact. Yeah, you just have to do it right. It needs to be high quality, good data and so on. Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
perfect. And you're working on the solution for this. And I really like learned this for myself as well. Walking through a forest, really go and check if there are different trees or if it's a monoculture. If it's a monoculture, it's basically not a forest. I mean, it's still called forest, but it's not a living forest. It's not wilderness as it can be. So
You can also just listen. In a forest with lots of different trees, there's a lot of noise, different sounds. And if it's monoculture, it's just boring.
yeah.
So do me this favor. When you're on the highway in Germany, look aside the highway. You see, first of all, a lot of forests. So it's good. We still have a lot of forests, yeah, even though we're losing a lot. But then look at the individual trees, and you might be thinking, oh, wait, they look all exactly the same. Why are they all the same? Is this accidentally? No, it's not accidentally. There's a good reason behind this, and that's what I just talked about. It's monoculture due to profitability reasons.
Yeah, it's all managed. Cool. Let's switch over to businesses, Tobias. Why is biodiversity so important for businesses?
Well, it is very important. And you mentioned the number 50% of global GDP that depends on the services of nature. If you think about it, there's no construction industry without timber, without the forest that you talk about. There's no fashion industry without natural fiber. There's no pharmaceutical industry without genetic materials from nature. And there's no food industry without the pollination of insects, bees, etc. So the services that nature provides us with, and free of charge, are really fundamental in the way we create economic value. It's also a big risk factor for companies. The European Central Bank just came out with a study saying 70% of all loans in the Eurozone are at risk if these nature services are not intact anymore. And my favorite example really is the grocery market, the supermarket. In Germany, there's a chain called Penny. There are different names in different countries. But in one of these stores, what they did one day was they removed all the products from the shelves that would not exist without pollination. 60% of the shelves were empty. No fruit, no vegetable, no coffee, no cocoa, no chocolate, no gummy bears, no mustard, no deep frozen pizza because it contains vegetable oil. All these kind of products were not there anymore. So this is, I think, a very illustrative example of how much we depend on nature services. And nature provides us with these services and with lots of solutions for free. We tend to think that we can always do it better with technological solutions, but that's really not the case. We need to appreciate what nature does for us and what is really fundamental to the way we live and we create value.
Right, and what I learned as a fun fact that is it's actually a mosquito which is pollinating the cacao plants.
No chocolate without mosquito. Yeah, that's what we need to think.
Good hint before the summer. Now, okay, Tony, put on your politics hat. Why is politics should care and act about biodiversity? What has politics to do with biodiversity?
Great question, Anna. And before I just answer that, I just want to take one moment. And that is, one of the rules of being on a panel is you never apologize to the audience. But I feel that we should apologize because when you look at the balance of panelists and you look at three things, you look at age and you look at ethnicity and you look at gender, we're okay on age with Anna and Christian. Actually, we're okay on gender because in the preparation for this panel, the content and the ideas and the energy, half of it came from Anna and the other half came from the three men. So we're good on gender as well. Ethnicity, we're not good and we can't pretend. And that voice has got to be there. Second rule about panels is you shouldn't experiment with the audience. But I'm going to experiment with you because I'm allowed to. And I'd like everyone to stand up, please. Can everyone stand up?
Us too?
No, you
Okay,
guys
we
are
can
fine.
sit. Okay.
Okay, so the experiment is you got one vote. You got one vote each, okay? And you're going to vote with your backside, okay, with your bottom. And you're going to sit down when you agree with a statement I make. And I'm going to give you three choices. Okay, you got three questions. First one is, please sit down if you would describe yourself as a rampant capitalist. Okay, let me soften it a bit for you. Please sit down if you would describe yourself as somebody who's trying to maximize and optimize returns to capital. Okay, tough audience. Okay, your third choice, please sit down if you're somebody who would like to maximize and optimize returns to natural capital and social capital and human capital and financial capital and political capital. So you're all capitalists. It's just that you didn't think in your head, oh, capitalism is about finance and it's bad and it's ugly and the world's going wrong. Capital is all of those forms. And biodiversity is part of natural capital. Nature has a living part and a non-living part. And the living part is biodiversity. And why is it so important for politics? Because that biodiversity is sovereign. It's in nation states. Germany has 80 species of tree. 80. There's another 70,000 in other countries. Individual countries have 10,000 different species of tree. That's what's important. And the benefits and the services and everything that we get from those aren't just grounded in the countries that we're in. Trees evolved 380 million years ago. And when they did, the climate was 10 degrees hotter than it is today. Not 1 degree or 10 degrees hotter than it is today. And CO2 was 10 times what it is today. 4,000 parts per million. And it was trees that made this planet habitable. They drew down that carbon. They made it habitable and also made the conditions right for the evolution of mammals. And there's only about 6,000 species of mammals in the entire world. 6,000 out of the tens of millions of different species, and yet we dominate that. And the politicians, we've got to help them prioritize biodiversity much more and speak language that common people understand. We're here with Nico Rosberg. Think about Formula One. We're at the starting track, ready to take off in our cars. Just 4 months ago, here in Germany, in Berlin, there were tractors on the grid, like at the start of an F1, because politicians had run way far ahead of people, under-negotiated, under-understood, under-explained, and now that nature law, that political instrument to change policy and taxes and subsidies and everything that comes with it, is at risk. So that was a very long answer to a short question. So.
But a great answer, very exciting, thank you. Very passionate answer. Very nice, okay, good. So we've understood all by now that biodiversity matters for us as humans, for business, for politics, for all of us. What I'm oftentimes missing a bit is to really have a good vision that we can all align on. It could be also good on this world. We could be happily living here in balance with nature. So I decided to ask you for your visions. And now let's do it a little bit like Walt Disney did when he created movies. It's a method for creativity. We are now entering a room where you can really dream big and no yes but are allowed right now. So no reality check. So completely blend out any reality check. Let's really dream big. So Tobias, what is your vision for the future of business and nature?
I think my future vision would be that we create value with nature and not against it. And that would mean, you all know the Earth Overshoot Day. So the day when we have already used all the resources that nature provides us with. I think it was a couple of days ago, no, that we passed the Earth Overshoot Day here for Germany, and for other countries it's even worse. So my dream would be that by 2030, or maybe be realistic a little bit later, we don't overuse resources, and the business models that we have and that are successful are circular, regenerative, and nature positive. I would add to this vision that I think I would love to see biodiversity being discussed in a positive narrative. We all remember the climate discussion, and we're still having this discussion today, where we talk about the costs and the bureaucracy and all the pain that it brings and all the challenges. There are lots of challenges associated with biodiversity and the transformation to nature positive, but there are lots of opportunities as well. And now that we're here on a tech setting, I think there's so much great technology that can flourish, that can solve lots of the challenges that we have, especially if those solutions are connected to nature. And there's a lot of inspiration that we can gain from such solutions. And I think here on the panel, without mentioning the names, there are two great CEOs and startups, or people representing the startups that have come up with solutions that address the challenges and make money at the same time. I hope, and this is last word, that in the future we have business models and solutions that work both for the planet and for the bottom line.
Okay. What do you think? Good vision? Good. Okay, perfect. Tony, how will the land look in the future? What role plays the land? What's your vision for the future in balance with nature?
Land has been one of those things that has been neglected. We have a convention on biodiversity, we have a convention on climate change, we have a convention on desertification. And the desertification was a hint towards land, but if you go back and look at Rio in 1992, or WSSD in 2002, or Rio Plus 20 in 2012, and just search the final document, 600-page document, how many times is the word land referenced? And it is in the word cloud, it's not one of the top 100 words. It's something that we skirt over. We don't want to talk about it as much. And land is that platform that connects all living things and non-living things. That it was geology. All of the other 100 billion stars and exoplanets in the entire galaxy, in the entire universe, are rock, are geological. Same periodic table as we have on Earth, but we are the only planet that we know that has life. And the vision is to prioritize that. And think about, we spend $150 billion a year on protecting biodiversity on Earth, and we spend $450 billion a year looking for life on other planets. It doesn't seem we got our priorities right. And I like the Disney approach because it's who's going to be doing that thinking and imagining? And it will be youth. And we've got to engage with youth in school curricula and helping, because that's where the change, it's not going to come with grey-haired men from the north, I can tell you that. We've got to engage with the youth and all of those groups together to see that biodiversity, that vision, it can be connected to clarity on what we mean by these things, setting it as a high priority, and thirdly, driving performance with biodiversity, appreciating that diversity and that wonder and complexity that we have.
Thank you. Wow, this is really a strong number. Life is so beautiful here on Earth. Why are we looking for life somewhere else? Good. Christian. Forests are playing a major role in the Earth's ecosystems, and you are thinking about forests all day. So what is the picture in your head that you're working towards? What's your vision?
Yeah, so I like what Tony just said, that without trees or without forests, there would not even be life on this planet. Yeah, And if you look at today's forests, the purpose of these managed forests has completely shifted. And our vision at Ocell is that we want to unlock the full and true potential that these forests actually have. We want to unlock this potential. We want to give the forest managers or even the landowners a completely new perspective in what they can do with this forest. And in order to do so, also what needs to be part of the vision is that companies, but also consumers, are fully aware of all of their decision making, all of the products that they buy, all of the services that they buy, that these services are aligned with these ecosystem visions and goals that we have. And so for us at Ocell, it's always about bringing the technology. So you said that it's an AI-based technology. So basically what we do is we analyze high-resolution aerial imagery of forests, and then based on this data, we propose a new management plan to this landowner. We say, hey, so we know in the past you have only focused on producing timber, producing wood, but what if you would get money for storing carbon? What if you would be paid for increasing biodiversity? And with carbon credits, this becomes a reality. Yeah. So if we can change that perspective of this forest owner, we can also change the management plan of that forest. And then all of a sudden, this forest is optimized to store more carbon. This forest is optimized for biodiversity and stability. Yeah. So this is basically the vision of me and the vision of Ocell.
Okay, very good vision. So let's get a little bit more down to earth now again from these visions. And I think what is a good interstep to do this is to quickly talk about this 30 by 30 goal that was set at the last COP on the biodiversity framework. How does it, so for everyone who haven't heard it, it was a conference of the parties. They agreed on a global biodiversity framework, and similar to the 1.5 degree target, set the target of 30 by 30, which means to protect 30% of land and water by 2030. 30%, we just learned it's 1%, that is wild today. So actually, I think it's 16% on land and 7% on marine that is currently protected. So we need to double to times 4 this. So how does that? Is that a good vision that we can align on? And how are you contributing to this? How are you thinking about this?
So at Ocell, we believe that, I mean, Tony was just talking about that everybody is a capitalist basically, and we believe that even if everybody is a capitalist, also in forestry, that you can still align the goal or the vision of a healthy ecosystem also with commercial interests. Yeah, you can do so. You don't have to put everything into a national forest, because keep in mind, wood is also an amazing material for carbon neutral construction. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we don't want to say, okay, let's stop harvesting completely and let's not use wood anymore. Mm-hmm. And then you would have to produce everything from steel or aluminum and so on. This would be much worse. Yeah, mm-hmm. So we have to find a balance of how we can optimize this ecosystem for both services, for both biodiversity, carbon storage, but also healthy production also of wood, so that we can use this wood. So that's why we are not a big fan of saying, okay, we have to protect all ecosystems, including all forests. We believe that you can achieve this in a completely different manner if you have the right tools, like I said, like carbon credits, for example, high integrity carbon credits with good data backing, and then forest owners, they are incentivized, financially incentivized to work on the same goals that we have, also on the political level.
Yeah. Tony, what are you thinking about this goal? We're going off record, off track here a little bit, but I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Can you?
Well, 30 is an interesting number because it could be 30 parts per million, or it could be the year 2030 or 30%, etc. And what we've done is let's look back at the last 20 years. Okay, so there was a period from 2010 to 2020, 10 years. And we set the Aichi targets for biodiversity, 10 years. 2010, we started the first International Year of Biodiversity. And by the way, next Wednesday is International Biodiversity Day. Did you know that? Are you going to celebrate it? Are you going to elevate it and talk to your friends about it? Next Wednesday. And then in 3 weeks' time, it's World Environment Day. So these are the times where we can showcase it. Anyway, back to 2010. Here we were. We set ourselves 20 targets globally, all countries. And all countries had to reach all of those 20 targets. And together then, we added them up. How many countries reached all 20 out of 196? 0. We failed abysmally. We set these targets. They're not legally binding. They're not even morally binding. You can promise something and pledge it and, oh, we hope we get there. We failed horrendously. And quite wisely at the meeting in Montreal at the end of 2022, China and Canada, who were kind of shepherding that process, said, whoa, let's agree the big picture stuff. Let's agree the vision and the goals. We'll get down to the indicators later. But we've got to hold those politicians to account and say, are we putting 1% of global GDP into reinforcing biodiversity? And biodiversity, we're all capitalists because some are natural capitalists and some are human capitalists and some are social capitalists. And we've all got to be these integrative capitalists that say, yeah, I want to leverage financial capital by paying attention to my social capital and to my natural capital. And not just thinking of returns and risks. Because there's returns and risks to natural capital as well. And together, that means there'll be trade-offs and synergies and antagonisms. And that comprehension and framework and prioritization is what we can all do. And we can do it in our daily lives as well. I mean, what a marketing trick. What an incredible marketing trick those household consumer goods people had. You've got 2 choices of washing powder, okay, for clothes. One is called bio, and the other is called non-bio. So what are you going to take? Oh, I'll buy the bio one. The one full of artificial enzymes, the one that damages the watercourses, the one that causes more pollution. Yeah, it makes your white shirt even whiter. You don't need it. What you want is non-bio. And we've got to flip our thinking and challenge these norms when it comes to biodiversity and hold politicians to account and hold each other to account. We've got nationally determined contributions. How much is Germany signing up for? How much is Europe? We've got to have corporately determined contributions and individually determined contributions. What am I going to do for biodiversity? Oh, I can't do anything. It's too big a problem. We can all do something.
That's true. So what are you doing for biodiversity? Except like...
I buy non-bio washing.
Dedicated.
I'll give you an example. I'm working in Papua New Guinea on this forest restoration project. It's in 360,000 hectares. It's an incredible forest. Papua New Guinea is this amazing place, has the most linguistic diversity. So the social capital that Papua New Guineans have is just off the chart. 800 different languages, not dialects, languages. They have 7% of the world's biodiversity in less than 0.5% of the world's land. Just incredible riches. Who's rich and who's poor? They are so rich. Rich in natural capital. What they're poor in is financial capital in that transformation process. And the extractive industry, the way we think of nature is we've got to extract it and refine it and sell it, and it's got to be one way. But as Tobias and Christian were saying, it's that circular economy and coming back to it. And I'm very fortunate to be engaged in that project. It's just this amazing thing. It's got the most iconic butterfly in the world. It's about a wingspan.
Wow.
Enormous. It is Alexander birdwing butterfly. It's huge. Tree kangaroos, just this incredible diversity. And yet, they don't know how to relate to the world. And we haven't rewarded them for being these stewards of future medicines, of this incredible services that biodiversity and the other nature that it's related to. Trees, I mean, Christian, nothing is better than a tree at bringing up water from depth, at storing carbon in the soil, at providing the framework for all of that other biodiversity. They're giving organic carbon, that glue that holds sand and silt and clay together, and make sure when it rains, your soil is a sponge and not just a sieve. And I'll go on and on and on because I used to be an academic. So
Tony, maybe just to say that, of course, most of the things that you say I fundamentally agree with, and I totally agree with. I would maybe challenge you a bit or look a little bit more positively at the political assessment. 30 by 30 was your question. I think we both attended the Montreal conference, and my feeling was that something big was happening. In 2015, we had the Paris Agreement for climate, and in Montreal, we have something similar, a global framework with certain numbers like this target 30 by 30. I think even though I question whether we will manage to implement that all, and there are lots of hurdles on the way, I like that we have such a goal that is more easy to understand than most of the other indicators and goals that we talk about in the sphere of biodiversity. The challenge of biodiversity is it's super complex. When it comes to measuring it, when it comes to defining KPIs. So I actually think we need on the superficial level, on the communication level, something that helps us understand this complex topic. For climate, it's easy. Yeah, we have the Paris Agreement, we have 1.5 degrees centigrade, and CO2 is the same everywhere in the world. If we emit 1 ton, it damages the same way, no matter where we emit it. For biodiversity, it's much more complex. So we need ways to understand and to reduce complexity. And at the moment, the Fortune 500 companies, the largest companies in the world, 83% of them have a climate strategy. Only 5% have a biodiversity strategy. They struggle with the topic. Biodiversity is not on the top agenda. Biodiversity, we need to make put nature on the balance sheet. We need to connect it with business and with economics. And I hope that the intention that such a political goal and process gets helps us on the way. Yeah. Now you disagree, okay.
Yeah, I would love to agree with you, Tobias. The problem is then we would both be wrong. Because let's look at life on land. SDG number 15. Number 15 out of 17. You know, you can imagine when they were being constructed, yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah, what about, oh yeah, add life on land. We'll put that in as number 15. And, you know, nature and biodiversity and all of those provisioning services that we have should be number 1 or 2. Maybe human well-being first and number 2, nature. And it's that prioritization. And it's great because the people that come to Montreal, they're in that ministry and it's their passion and they do a brilliant job with the little support that they get and the lack of political, prioritization. And we've got to help them so that they can be more successful. And we've got to make those targets and those goals and those indicators to achieve them, as you say, much, much more tangible, but also accountable. And there's got to be sanctions and penalties and incentives and subsidies and taxes that are levied to support that change. Because without it, we'll have another apology in 10 years' time and say, and so how many of the 20, we now have 24 goals. How many of the 24 goals did we reach?
So let's stay with that. So let's make it very, very concrete. What does need to happen next in order to reach these goals from all different stakeholders? You can make a wish list, and as well, what could the audience do?
There's always consultations. They open up documents for consultation. Now, you don't want to read a 600-page document where half of the text is in a square bracket. A square bracket means countries haven't agreed to something, so they're going to put it in alternate text, and we'll come to that later. Okay? We'll get back to it later. And when they went into Montreal, there were 900 paragraphs, 900 in square brackets. And those poor people stayed up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning trying to come up with a common language, okay? But you can be biodiversity activists. Everyone can write into their local MP, to the European MPs, you can write a letter to the heads of state. All of the emails are there on the World Bank website. You can write a letter to all of the heads of the state in the world as an individual And it's about saying it matters so much more to us. We see it's so important for our children. And to make sure it's coming back through curricula and that youth are engaged and everyone's getting the message and talking about it. Don't feel embarrassed if you didn't remember that next Wednesday is International Biodiversity Day, but now you do, okay? Talk about it. Please have one dinner time conversation about it. Don't bore your other guests, but have one about it and get some excitement going about it. Make sure that it's there in the press, write a letter. Let's engage with it, as we go.
That's a good point. So, Tobias, businesses are holding a major lever for this in their hands. How will they use it, and how can we make this reality?
Well, I think what we need is action. As you just mentioned, each of us can do a lot, and companies can do a lot. And I always like to say that we can do a lot on 3 different levels. Footprint, handprint, and heartprint. First, the footprint. That is our negative impact on nature, on the planet. We can reduce this negative impact. So we emit less CO2. We use less pesticides. We manage forests better. We do less harm to nature. Yeah? So companies can do this, look at their supply chains and reduce the damage. And each of us can think about our personal consumer behavior. Second is handprint, the positive impact that we have. There's so much we can do to protect nature, or think of the transformation of business models to become more circular, as we already discussed, more regenerative, nature positive. So do more of the better. And I think that's not enough. I think we need heartprint. We need to win the hearts of people for this transformation. And this is really next Wednesday, and every dinner conversation is where we can do this. But I think we also need to talk about the best practices. How does it work? We need positive incentives, positive narratives, examples of what each of us can do. And I think if you and we go next time to the supermarket and think about our favorite product that we buy there, we can think about more closely, how was that actually created? How much damage was done to nature? What could the company, what can we do to actually create positive handprint and heartprint? Maybe on these 3 levels.
Great, and if I may add to this, and you mentioned that only a few companies so far have biodiversity targets, but what we see at NALA is really as well a kind of a corporate movement towards the biodiversity. So there is a lot of awakening within the corporate. So when you are a sustainability manager within a corporate, make sure to really check, is biodiversity a material topic for you? Can you prioritize it? Can it be your unfair disadvantage right now? There are 320 companies, global big players, who are the TNFD early adopters currently, who are coming up with a biodiversity strategy, accounting for their nature and biodiversity dependencies. So there is a lot of movement happening there. And I think from this, coming back to the name of this panel, biodiversity, the next big thing for business and nature. For nature, this is for businesses. I truly believe it well. Christian, you have now the last words. Please complete the following sentence. If this happens, I am throwing a big party at the Ocell team.
If we manage to get 10 major companies, Fortune 500 companies, to invest in proper forest projects with us at Ocell, then I'm more than happy to throw a big party. So please feel free to contact me if you're here in the audience.
Great, okay. Cool. And you will all invite us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And maybe just let me add this. So you've talked about strategy a lot, like business strategy on biodiversity and so on. So I always say I've kind of heard enough of the net zero strategy. Everybody has big strategies, but we need to act. Like, where are the sustainability managers today that are willing to invest? Yeah, we talk to a lot of companies that say, oh yeah, the directive is coming, we need to focus on reporting. Okay, cool, but nature cannot wait. Yeah, so we got to act now.
Yeah, and we're losing 150 species every day.
Absolutely.
So yeah, very, very urgent. Okay, perfect. We have a few minutes left for your questions. Good, yeah, go ahead. I will repeat the question so that the people on the stream can hear it as well.
Pekka Harjuautti from Liberty Earth. Great point that you mentioned about this so-called unfair advantage that could be with the biodiversity as a tool but how to make it as a good metrics? How can you really state that you have done this much, that it's not easy? What is the state of the art? What is the best thing so far that you have found?
So I probably should answer this question myself, but I want to give you as well. So the question is very concrete: how can we measure biodiversity? How can we make it really measurable for the companies? So maybe one word from me on this, as we're working in this field with NALA, we're making it measurable for businesses. We're aggregating 30 different databases and data. This is satellite images, but as well academic data. And we are transforming it into 5 KPIs that are relevant for the businesses. This is land degradation, this is biodiversity importance, biodiversity decline. So is it important in this area? Is it declining? The water stress and the water pollution, because water is such a big part as well. And we believe that these 5 indicators are easy enough for businesses to really understand it, actionable enough at the same time, and by this we're kind of breaking down this complexity. So I think the main thing is it is possible to measure it. It will never be perfect because nature is the most complex thing that is on Earth. It will never be perfect, but the data is there. There are satellites as we speak going around the Earth in a resolution that we've never seen before. So we exactly know where we are harming nature and biodiversity. So the argument is we cannot measure it, so we cannot do anything about it, does not count anymore. So don't let anyone get away with that. Chris, what do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very fair question, and people ask us this all the time. How do you measure biodiversity of a forest? Yeah, and we try to make it as simple as possible. And we always say, what is the distribution of species that you have within your forest? This is something that everybody can understand. Is it just a monoculture, or do you have 5 or 10, or like Tony said, 800 different species? Yeah. So this is something that everybody can understand. It's quite easy, and it's also easy to measure if you have the right tools. Yeah. So this is how we approach this topic.
Yeah. Good. Next question over there. Okay, so the question is now then we're not even not always hitting our climate goals, and now another goal on top, another crisis on top, another topic on top. How do you deal with this, and how do you mobilize people for caring about it? Is that correct?
Just to show that it's a different problem.
Yeah. Who wants to take that? Yeah.
I could start by saying, yes, it's a different problem, but it's very much connected to climate. Actually, climate and biodiversity are 2 sides of the same coin. If we think about the emissions, 50% of all emissions that we produce actually don't go into the atmosphere and do harm, but are absorbed by nature, by the forests, by the mangroves, etc. So without biodiversity and without looking at biodiversity connected to climate, we would already be far beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature increase. So we need to connect the two and think about solutions that help address both challenges and both crises. And there are lots of examples, and I think you made this nice statement at the very beginning, how climate is the one that shapes the future, how we will live on this planet in the future, and biodiversity is if we will survive on the future, if we survive on the planet in the future. And if we think about actions, it's interesting to say that everything we do for biodiversity also benefits climate. Whereas some things that we do for climate are not good for biodiversity. Think about water dams that we build. Renewable energy, it's good for climate, but it's not good for biodiversity because lots of destruction of biodiversity there. So connect the two, think about the differences. I think this...
I heard somewhere that if we destroyed all biodiversity in forests, then we need to learn photosynthesis ourselves.
Yeah, that's why in all of the climate protection projects that we offer in forestry, biodiversity always plays an essential role also for carbon storage, because if you don't have a diverse forest, then this carbon is not stored permanently because this forest is at high risk. Yeah, so you need to have more of a diverse, more of a mixed forest in order to store carbon long time in these forests. So permanent storage is essential.
Okay, perfect. So I'm not getting nervous with this clock turning red soon, but Tony is. So we have one more question. So ladies first here. We had yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been really, really interesting. But I'm lacking one topic. So I work with sustainable blue bioeconomy. And we have a great panel here. We're talking about forests, but we're not mentioning the seas at all.
Yeah.
So maybe this is not a question for you guys, and I guess that's the point. But how do we highlight the sustainable blue bioeconomy and everything it can do for sustainability and climate, and how do we create an equal sign between blue and green sustainability and biodiversity?
Yeah. Okay, so the question or the hint was that we're not covering the importance of oceans and marine ecosystems here on this panel, and I think you're absolutely right. And maybe we can use this as a request to the GreenTech Festival organizers for next time to more cover really the blue economy as well, and the blue carbon as well, as this is so important. Anything, yeah.
Yeah, it is a very good point. And sadly, life on land is goal number 13, and life on water was goal number 14. So even lower down the pecking order. I think that your point and everything else can be summed up. Actually, biodiversity is fine. It's going to be okay. Humans are not. There is going to be a post-human era on this planet. And how long do we want to survive for? 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years more? But we're going to go extinct. And it is that extinction rate that is most worrying. And if you want a single metric, it's stop that elevation in extinction. At the moment, we're running at about 50 times the background extinction rate. 50. So if you want to solve one thing, slow down the extinction rate. And what do you have to do that? We have to make sure that we're not polluting waterways. We have to make sure that there is a better connection between land and the sea. We have to make sure that we're not overexploiting, that we're measuring things, because if we don't know what that extinction rate is. And that's the real clue of thinking. You want to give one message to somebody, it's about extinction and making sure that we're covering that. And everyone can manage that in themselves. Biodiversity is genes, species, and ecosystem. You are an ecosystem. You have 10,000 different species inside you. 10,000. You have 100 billion human cells and 150 billion non-human cells inside of you. You're an ecosystem. You have 30,000 human genes. You have 2 million non-human genes. You are biodiversity. Look after yourselves and your mental health and your physical health and your well-being and how you interact with people depends on your own biodiversity. And if you want to measure one thing, look after your own biodiversity, and then you will be able to start thinking, oh, now I can look after somebody else's in the community and more. But for it. Thank you.
Okay, so these are great closing words. Thank you. Thank you for the audience and to our great panel. Thank you.
It's time to wake up.